Hello and welcome back to Superhero Maniac, your one-stop destination for all superhero updates. The first episode of Moon Knight was arguably one of the most hyped episode ever in an MCU series, and Marvel has finally released the second episode after a week's wait. And I must say that it was totally worth it. In this video, we shall be covering the full breakdown of Moon Knight's episode 2, and you better watch the full video as the details only keep getting better as we proceed. So let us get straight into it without any further ado. The episode begins with Stephen Grant painstakingly waking up from his dream in shock after hearing some hazy reverberation of the museum incident in his dream. Unlike last time though, when he thought that it was just a dream, he was certain this time around that the incident at the museum really did take place, and we get sure about it when he tried to speak with Mark in the mirror right after waking up. Upon reaching the museum, both Mark and the fans were up for the biggest surprise when the security footage from the last night's incident showed no traces of Egyptian jackal and Moon Knight as well. The footage just showed a scared Steven running around like a lunatic inside the museum, and when he came out of the bathroom he looked straight into the camera, and at the moment Steven knew that it was not him but Mark. And this was when Stephen Grant was 100% sure that something was seriously wrong with him. Now the museum obviously thinks that the Stephen has vandalized the museum bathroom, and thus they fired him. However, there was a scene where Stephen met the museum counselor, and the scene might have some big implications. The counselor understood his mental health condition and gave him a pamphlet for a therapy. Interestingly, in one of the teaser of Moon Knight, we have to see what apparently looks like a mental asylum, where Stephen Grant was being treated for his mental health. And it might be so that later on this series, Stephen indeed gets himself admitted. In Marvel's Moon Knight Volume 8 comic book, we see a similar storyline where Mark gets admitted to an institution where Dr. Emmett tried to convince him that he was not actually Moon Knight. It later turned out that Dr. Emmett was actually an incarnation of Emmett, and Mark was able to flee the institution. It would be totally awesome if Marvel used a part of that storyline in the first season of Moon Knight. The scene where Stephen Grant gives away his name tag to the counselor is an absolute beautiful one, as it clearly symbolizes how he is having a tough time fiddling between his many identities. He set on a mission to find out what the hell was happening with his life and tracing the clues. He found the storage locker whose key he got from the hidden chamber in his apartment in the first episode. Outside the locker, we got yet another QR code upon scanning, which in real life fans were taken to the Marvel website, where they receive a free copy of Werewolf by the night issue number 33. Moon Knight made his Marvel debut in the same series in issue number 32. You can find the link to this QR code in our description below. Inside the storage locker, Stephen found all the mercenary equipment of Mark, including a duffel bag that had the scarab cache of various currency and a passport with the name Mark Spector. This was the first clue that proved that Mark Spector was the actual identity and Stephen Grant was his secondary identity. Upon hearing the voice of Mark Spector yet again from his reflection, Stevens decided that he would never give control of his body to him again after seeing the violence that he inflicted last night, and decided to surrender to police to make sure that Mark did not harm an innocent person ever again. This shows that Steven has a good heart, and we get yet another example of this later in this episode when he stops telling Lila about the scarab upon hearing that it could put her life at risk, although he had barely known her. In a spooky sequence, however, Steven was chased down by Khonshu when he tried to flee the area. There are two major takeaways from this scene. Firstly, we got a clear look at Khonshu. He is completely comic accurate, and the way his skull levitates over his hollow neck resembles Marvel comic totally. Secondly, when Stephen Grant was running, we could see that his shadow were forming crescent shapes, which is Moon Knight's trademark shape. After exiting the storage area, he meets Lila and finds out that she is Mark's wife. In Marvel Comics, there is no character called Lila, and Mark has a wife called Merlene, and he also has a kid with her. The name of Mark's wife has probably been changed for some reason in the MCU series. When the two reach Steven's apartment, we find out that the Steven and Lila have a lot in common. They have the same attachment to Egyptian history and they also love the same French poem. This indicates the identity of Steven Grant has probably picked up a lot of traits from her wife. The facts that Lila doesn't know about Mark's split personality disorder also proves that the identity of Steven probably came along only a few years ago, and Mark, as we know, is the main character. In Steven's apartment, we could see a book called The Man in Ice, which is the story about a man who returns after being stuck in the ice for 5,000 years, and this is clearly an Easter egg about Captain America. After the two officers arrest Steven Grant, they tell him about the gruesome act that the Mark Spector has committed in Egypt, and shortly after, a brilliant close-up shot at the passenger's seat mirror revealed that the two were actually Harrow's followers. As we saw the Emmett tattoo on Kennedy's wrist, by the way, the character of DC Fitzgerald seems to be Molly Fitzgerald, who has made several appearances in Marvel Comics. Talking about the thing that Mark Spector supposedly did in Egypt, they told Steven that Mark tied up the archaeologist for an archaeological dig in Egypt and shot them dead. He was actually framed, and this incident was a part of his origin story in Marvel Comics as well. Raoul Bushman had hired mercenary Mark Spector, but when he realized his evil motives, Mark turned against him and tried to save archaeologists, but he fatally wounded himself in the process, and that was when Khonshu found him. By the time Steven got to Arthur Harrow, the avatar of Emmett had figured out that he was having a hard time dealing with all the voices inside him, and thus he tried to manipulate him into giving the scarab. Interestingly, he knew everything that Khonshu was telling him, and upon being asked how, Harrow revealed that he earlier used to avatar of Khonshu before he switched sides. He made a very important revelation here by saying that Khonshu could not do anything to Steven apart from maybe changing the weather by a tad, and he needed his avatar to work for him. In simpler terms, Khonshu is crippled without his avatar. Arthur Harrow tried to explain the basic difference between Emmett and Khonshu's ideologies to Mark Spector to change his mind. Khonshu is the god of moon and vengeance, and thus he only takes action when someone has committed a sin and it is too late. However, Emmett judges people based on what they are doing to do in the future as well, just like we saw with the old lady in the first episode. However, Steven could not relate to this at all, as he draws the line at kids, and he didn't think that killing a kid based on something he could do 30 years later was logical. And Harrow demanded the scarab after that. After Lila's surprise entry, Steven and Lila try to flee from the place and Harrow's men chase them. Meanwhile, Harrow showcases the power of his cane, which possesses a fraction of Emmett's power, and using it, he summons a beast from the underworld. Lila asks Steven to summon the suit, which means that she knew that Mark was Moon Knight. We would probably get to know more about it in future episodes. Steven transforms into Mr. Knight and we get the first look into the alternate version of Moon Knight. According to the Marvel Comics, Mr. Knight is a much smarter version of Moon Knight. He generally sticks to non-violence just like Steven Grant and helps the police in solving crimes. Perhaps this is why Steven could transform into this form effortlessly. Interestingly, the mystic beast summoned by Arthur Harrow can be seen by only the avatars of Egyptian gods, and thus Lila and the other people on the road cannot see the jackal. However, it doesn't stop it from harming the masses. We cannot see it, but we can hit it, while it can both see us and hit us. What a complicated equation. While the first episode didn't all seem to like it was set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the second episode confirmed that Moon Knight is indeed set in the MCU. The bus into which Mr. Knight collides after being hit by the Jackal has GRC written on it, which is the same organization in the MCU which was built to provide a better lifestyle to the people who returned from the snap. Also, the top view of the bus showed the words WBN0032, which points out to Werewolf by Night issue number 32 where Moon Knight made his MCU debut. Well, after seeing that the Jackal was causing harm to the people on the road, Stephen Grant gave control to Mark Spector, who immediately got converted into Moon Knight and beat the shit out of the creature. But Mark didn't give the body back to Steven, and he revealed that ever since Steven has been aware of his presence, the one who controls the body has become stronger. So does this mean that we wouldn't see Stephen Grant again in the series? We will have to wait for the rest of the episode to find it out. The confrontation between Mark and Khonshu at the end cleared up a lot of things. Firstly, the origin story of Moon Knight has been kept the same as comics. Mark Spector was on the verge of dying and he thus made a deal with Khonshu to be his avatar in exchange for having his life back. Secondly, Arthur Harrow was right about there is always one more task, which implies that Khonshu will never leave Mark. We know this by how he threatened him to possess his wife Layla next if Mark decides to not to be his avatar anymore. And thus we see that just like Steven, Mark is stuck in his life as well. Meanwhile, the scarab of Emmett that Mark lost was found by Arthur Harrow. There is an important observation in this scene though. In order to take the scarab from the elderly man who had found it, he killed him just like the old lady from the first dream, but this time Arthur didn't even use Emmett's judgment. And thus we can see there is probably something fishy about the whole thing, and holier than thou concept of Emmett and Arthur Harrow is not entirely true. On the other hand, fans are now also in a fix regarding whether they can trust Khonshu, as on one hand he is up against antagonist Emmett, but on the other hand he is also blackmailing Mark Spector by using Layla as a bait. We would probably get an answer to all that in the upcoming episode. The last scene of the episode shows that Mark Spector is now in Egypt. As Arthur Harrow now possesses the scarab, he will go all out on his conquest to find the tomb of Emmett, and that is why Mark is in Egypt, to stop Arthur from waking Emmett up. So that was our breakdown of Moon Knight's second episode. If you liked the video, please do give us a thumbs up and share the video with your friends. Also, do not forget to subscribe to Superhero Maniac and press the bell icon to never miss an update about your favorite superheroes. We will be back soon with yet another exciting video. Till then, signing off.